What's going on, everybody? As the title said in the thumbnail, it's a beginner's guide to working out. So pretty much for all those New Year's resolutioners, people that maybe haven't been in the gym or just want some tips and tricks, this is a video for you. We're gonna go over training, supplements, diet, recovery, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, this could be probably like an 8-week seminar for 8 hours a day with a lot of information. We'll dig into more of the nitty-gritty stuff during prep, but we're just gonna go over what you should do with your training, supplements, diet, nutrition, stuff like that. The basics, the bare bones. But yeah, definitely a lot of information packed, so let's get to it. Let's start with training in the gym. The question I probably get most of all about training is how often should you go to the gym? I think for most people, 3 to 5 days is good. For beginner, 3 days is perfect. You can do 3 full body workouts, or you can do 1 full body and then an upper and lower. If you do have a little bit more time and a little bit more, I guess, kind of advanced or want to push a little bit more, I think 4 days would be perfect. Upper, lower split, repeat twice a week, and you'll be golden. There are also lots of programs like push-pull legs, body part split, the Arnold split, stuff like that. Definitely you can look into those. I would say that 6 days a week is probably a bit much. You're probably overtraining, but most of all, follow the structured program. That's where you have something to track and follow on a weekly basis. Make sure that you're not just going in the gym winging it. It also helps with your efficiency in the gym, going in with a plan, getting shit done, and then moving on. As you get more into the gym, you'll probably hear a few words in terms of training, such as volume, intensity, and frequency. So I just want to define those for you guys. So frequency is basically just the amount of time you hit a muscle group, typically per week. That's probably the most commonly used measurement. So if you say this program hits your chest 2 times per week, or the frequency of 2 times, it's gonna be 2 times per week. Just like an upper lower split would hit the upper body twice and the lower body twice. And then intensity is essentially how close you take a set to failure. So 2 terms that go along with intensity are gonna be RPE, or reps of perceived exertion, and then RIR, or reps in reserve. So RPE is typically a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being basically impossible. With a gun to your head, you couldn't get 1 more, and then 0 or 1 being super easy. And then RIR is pretty much the reverse, which is basically how many reps you have left in the tank. So 0 being a 10 RPE, or basically you can't do another rep, where 1 or 2 meaning you could probably do 1 or 2 more extra reps during that set. And then volume is pretty much the total of your workload. It's gonna be the amount of weight you do, time the reps, time the sets, and that's gonna be the overall volume of that workout or of that muscle group. So those are a few terms you might run into as you get into training into the gym a little bit more. That's true failure. Oh my goodness. So as far as frequency, as I mentioned, the amount of time you want to hit a muscle group per week, I think 2 or 3 is a really good number. For beginners, I would say 2 is pretty much perfect. If you are going to hit 3 times per week, you probably want a little bit more rest. That's why I recommend a full body split at 3 days per week, adding a rest day in between each workout. As far as the actual intensity, I highly recommend probably 1 to 3 reps in the tank, or RIR, for most movements. And you can probably get away with maybe close to failure on things like isolation, like a bicep curl, leg extension, that kind of thing. But definitely don't want to go to failure too often on compounds, as the overall fatigue will probably outweigh the benefit. And then for overall workload, pretty much you want to do as little as you can to get the most results. So sometimes more isn't always better. Just adding unnecessary volume isn't always the best thing. You want to make sure you have proper execution, really good intensity and form technique, and then increase volume over time. But yeah, honestly, volume, you want to do as little as you can to see the results you want. Another thing when it comes to volume is basically I get asked, how many reps should you do? And there's a pretty big rep range, a lot of studies. Most people probably tell you anywhere from 5 to 30 reps. I do think that's probably right as far as like scientific studies go, but as far as actual application, I'd probably stick closer to maybe 6 to 15, 6 to 8 being probably most of your compounds. You want to train a little bit heavier. And then for your accessories, I maybe say 10 to 15 with a little bit more volume. I just don't think that anything above like 20 reps, a lot of times you'll have such a light weight that you can't really tell if like momentum is coming in a little bit or what true failure is, since the weight is so light. And if you do go below 5, it's definitely more strength focused rather than hypertrophy or muscle building. So I'd say 6 to 15 reps is probably the rep range you want to stay in. As far as some key movements that every good program should have, actually hinting at a different video I have filmed already, is going to be a squatting pattern, a hip hinge pattern, a horizontal push and pull, and a vertical push and pull. A hack squat is a great example of an alternate to a squat. So it's still a squatting pattern, but it's not an actual barbell squat. Just like the leg press would be a good option as well. Something that's a squatting pattern, but not necessarily a squat itself. Another great thing as you start working into the gym, form is going to be critical. You should definitely dial in your form before you start adding weight. Just like anything else, you want to make sure your form is good to prevent injury, as well as to make sure you're maximizing the output of that specific muscle you're trying to target. Guys like Jeff Nipper, Jeff Cavalier, Scott Herman have a lot of how-to videos. Jeff Nipper's Technique Tuesday is probably one of my favorite series for someone that's trying to learn how to do a movement specifically. And also in-personal trainers are great as well. Just make sure you know what they're doing. As I'll admit, certifications are pretty easy to get, so make sure they're well-versed, have a lot of clients and experience training people, and they can also help you out with correcting your form too. Another term you'll hear a lot is progressive overload. So pretty much in any program where you have someone who wants to get stronger, the term progressive overload will come into play at some point. Typically this means increasing the amount of work you're doing or your load over time. So you want to increase your reps, your weight, but that's not the only way to progressive overload. You can also slow down the reps, have better form, more control. Those are all forms of progressive overload beyond just adding weight to the bar or more reps to your sets. So there are a lot of ways to go about progressive overload. Just remember, when we go to the gym, we want to get stronger over time. We do want to build muscle. We want to get better. Just like anything else, we don't want to stay the same. We always want to progress and get to that next level. And when it comes to progressive overload, what I recommend for pretty much actually beginners as well as advanced trainees is a double progression system. And this basically means you're going to work within a rep range. So for example, let's say 8 to 10, and we'll just take back squat, for example. So you're going to start with 3 sets of 8 reps, and you're gonna keep this weight the same until you get to 10 reps. Then once you get to 10 reps with squat for 3 sets, then you'll go ahead and bring the reps back down to 8 and increase the weight. So say you're doing a 100-pound back squat for 3 sets of 8, you're gonna work your way up to doing 100 pounds for 3 sets of 10, and you'll go ahead and bring the reps down to 8, and then maybe jump up to 105 or 110 pounds and work your way back up and continue that ladder, progress in reps, add weight, and then repeat that process. But another thing when it comes to training, what kind of exercise selection you have, there's free weights, which can be like the dumbbells, the barbells, that kind of thing. You have your machines, which is basically machines, pretty self-explanatory, and you have your cables. So there's a variety of different ways to hit different muscle groups. Obviously, free weights will have a little bit more stabilizers. I think machines are a great way to learn a movement. If you have never done a chest press before, I would say start on machines and then work your way to the free weight. It's gonna be a lot harder to learn the movement pattern doing a free weight first versus a machine. So I do think the machines are a great way to start and then work your way to free weights. Obviously, if you feel comfortable, you maybe trained a little bit in high school, whatever it might be, you can definitely head to the free weights to start. But something like a leg extension is a really good way to hit the quad in a shortened position and pretty much the only way you can. So sometimes machines really do have an advantage over free weights or cables. To be honest, as long as you're hitting the muscle group probably 2 or 3 times per week at an adequate intensity and a decent volume, you'll probably make gains. And I'll be honest, most beginners will kind of make gains no matter what, but I highly recommend following a structured program so you can see the progress and maximize the results, because although you might be getting results no matter what, you definitely want to get the most bang for your buck and learning form and technique correctly. Also, I did say one thing. I said the quad in the shortened position. So just for people that might not know, shortened versus lengthened. So what I mean by shortened position is when the quad is contracted, it is shortened. So this muscle right here, your quad, which runs from your hips to your knees, it's actually just past your knee, but it basically is gonna be in a shortened position when you're flexing it and a lengthened position as you stretch it. So when I say shortened position, it means that the muscle itself is shorter, contracted, and when I say lengthen, it's gonna be extended or stretched. That's just quick terminology in case you hear shortened versus lengthened. And the last thing we need to cover before we end this gym session is cardio. So I get a lot of questions. Should I do cardio? How much cardio should I do? What equipment should I use for cardio? All that kind of stuff. And honestly, at the end of the day, pretty much any piece of equipment, it might change how quickly you burn calories, but burning calories is what you're doing. There's no way to like burn fat versus carbs. You're just burning calories. In order to lose weight, you need to be in a calorie deficit. Talk about that later, but I mean, you've got the Stairmaster, you got the elliptical, treadmill, stationary bike. Honestly, pick your preference. As far as how much cardio you should do, in my opinion, you should do cardio for overall baseline health, train your heart, train your lungs, make sure you're always in shape. I personally like 8 to 10,000 steps on the bulk, and when I'm on a cut, I'll probably do cardio 2 to 3 times a week, depending on how much of a deficit I need to get into. But yeah, do it whatever you prefer, do however much you want. Definitely not necessary, but definitely a good way to keep a baseline health level. Alrighty, that's a wrap on the training portion. If you guys have any more questions about training, leave them down in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer those. But next thing, we'll head to the GNC store and go over supplements. And after workout, we're gonna head over to GNC, go over some supplements that you guys should have. I basically have tier lists, what I call my essential supplements and what I call like luxury or kind of bonus supplements as well. All right, so as far as supplements go, I would say there's probably 3 essential supplements that I recommend everybody take. The first one is gonna be our creatine. So the big thing here is creatine monohydrate should be the main ingredient. 3 to 5 grams a day, depending on the person. If you're a smaller person, probably 3 grams is fine. But yeah, 5 grams a day to start taking it. There is such a thing as a loading phase if you want to. I personally don't recommend it for most of my clients, as it can sometimes cause bloating or a little bit of an upset stomach. So I think 5 grams in a week or 2, you'll be fully saturated and just continue to take that on a daily basis. Next is gonna be a protein. So here we have a whey protein. This is an isolate. So there's isolates and concentrates. Concentrates are a little bit lower basically purification in terms of protein. So typical concentrate is probably about 23, 24 grams of protein per serving. An isolate's gonna be a little bit higher at 28 grams per serving. So highly recommend that. Also, Transparent Labs, bring back fruity cereal. That's by far my favorite flavor. It's discontinued, so right now I'd say chocolate's probably my second. And then the last one on my top 3 supplement tier list is gonna be a multivitamin. So this is gonna be basically a gap filler for basically all the little vitamins and minerals you need in your diet. Obviously, a well-balanced diet is key. This does not substitute out for your fruits, your vegetables, your lean protein sources, but it's a great way to kind of fill in the gaps if you don't have the most variety in your diet. A few other supplements I do recommend, but I'll call them kind of luxury or bonus supplements, are gonna be things like caffeine. So caffeine is great, obviously in energy drinks. You can also have a pre-workout, something like this. Transparent Lab has their bulk pre-workout. I am not using caffeine currently just because I'm out of bulk. I got plenty of sleep, but definitely when I get my cut, when I have a little bit extra energy, I'll definitely be using bulk. But right now what I use is basically a pump product, which is another kind of non-essential, but a luxury to have. This is gonna have some nitric oxide in there, basically give you a better pump, a little bit more blood flow, a little bit better in the gym, which can be motivation to push. So other things like greens powders, reds powders, definitely are good supplements, but not gonna be replacing actual fruits and vegetables in your diet. Things like there's fish oil, if you don't eat a fatty fish or don't have fish in your diet, as well as a sleep aid, whether it be melatonin, an actual sleep aid, or even some patches. I know they make like sleep patches now that release melatonin directly on the skin. But yeah, there are a few other supplements. Obviously, there's a lot. I mean, in Shinsi, you can see the amount of supplements they have. I definitely think those are kind of like the top tier that I'd recommend taking. Everything beyond that is definitely gonna be something that isn't necessary. And once again, as a beginner, you don't really need these supplements. I definitely think protein, creatine, and some sort of multivitamin are gonna be the staples that you wanna have in your routine.
All right, we've made it back home. And before I go over nutrition as well as general advice and recovery, I did think I missed the amount of sets per muscle group. That's one thing I don't think I covered. I covered the frequency 2 to 3 times per week. I covered the reps, I would say 6 to 15, although you can probably go 5 to 30. And as far as the actual sets per muscle group, this does vary a little bit depending on one's training level, experience in the gym, mind-muscle connection, and also just individual muscle groups for individual people vary quite a bit. But I would say probably between actually probably similar to the reps. I'd probably say 6 to 20 sets per muscle group is probably a pretty good number. I would say 10 to 20 is a pretty typical number for most people in the industry. But I do notice if you have really good form technique and high intensity, some muscle groups only might need 6 or 7 sets per week, but you'll have to play around with that a little bit. If you have a coach or someone helping you through this process, they can definitely be a great assistance, but it's gonna be more of listening to your body, figuring out how much volume you personally need. But I just wanna make sure that's clear as far as the sets per muscle group. I would say 6 to 20 sets per muscle group. The next topic I wanted to discuss was nutrition. So no better place than the kitchen with a post-workout meal. We have a little bit of pasta, some ground beef, red sauce, and some cheese in there. But yeah, so as far as nutrition goes, there'll be a lot of different categories as far as like diets. There's keto, there's tracking, there's intermittent fasting, there's calorie counting, there's a million things under the sun. But I'm gonna answer the question real quick of, do you need to track in general? And the answer really comes down to, as a beginner, probably not. As long as you kind of follow general guidelines, increase your protein, eat some fruits and vegetables, get some carb sources in, focus on whole foods, you probably don't need to track. But I will say with a caveat that tracking will probably lead to the best results, as you would making sure that you hit your macro and calorie goals on a daily and weekly basis. Where intuitive eating does have that drawback of you're not exactly sure how much you're eating, but your body's pretty smart. And if you're hungry, you're probably under eating. If you're full all the time, feel like you have a bloated stomach, you're probably eating the wrong things or a little bit too much. Me personally, I think the biggest benefit that someone can have starting out going to the gym as a beginner is to have the mindset of food as fuel. If you go with the mindset that food is your fuel, you eat good, you feel good, you train well, and you look good. If you eat bad, you're gonna look bad, you're gonna perform bad, and you're gonna feel bad. So that's the biggest thing. I think that is a major change. I don't want you to demonize foods by thinking some good or some bad, but there are definitely things that are more beneficial to your overall health than others. Obviously, things like Reese's Cups and alcohol aren't gonna be as beneficial as fruits, vegetables, and lean protein sources like meat and fish. It's just the way it is. Yes, the Reese's and the beer probably taste a little bit better, and you might have that craving a little bit more. But what's gonna help you the most is a whole diet. I would say 80-20 is what I like to say for a lot of my lifestyle clients. 80% whole foods, 20% I'll call them fun foods rather than like bad or junk foods. Things like Pop-Tarts, Reese's, beer, stuff like that. I think 80-20 is a pretty good split and allows you to have a good balance, which is gonna keep you consistent on your diet. And just like everything else, there are levels to this. If you do wanna go ahead and track your macros, I personally recommend 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. If you are someone that's pretty overweight or heavily obese, you probably don't need 0.8 to 1 grams. I would probably try to figure out your lean body mass and then go from there. As far as fats, I would say your fat macros, set those between 0.2 to 0.3 grams per pound of body weight, and then your carbs can fill in the rest. And then as far as what I mean fill in the rest, you'll need to know your maintenance calories to determine how many carbs to add in. And as far as finding your maintenance, I do have a whole video on this as well, but typically a TDEE calculator on the internet, total daily energy expenditure, is a good place to start. But then you'll have to eat at that level for a minimum of 2 weeks, tracking your weight to see if your weight goes up or down. If your weight goes up, you're probably in a surplus and that maintenance was not correct for you. If the weight goes down, you're probably in a deficit. So you have to adjust things. Not every calculator is gonna be perfect. And as far as the rest of the nutrition, it does come to personal preferences. And then also as far as if you want to cut, bulk, or maintain, that's primarily determined by the amount of calories you eat. If you want to be in a surplus in a building phase, I recommend about 300 calorie surplus above your maintenance. If you want to maintain, obviously just eat your maintenance calories. If you want to cut, I would recommend a 500 calorie deficit. Also, you can use a little bit of cardio to work into that deficit. So you might eat 400 calories less than your maintenance and then do 100 calories of cardio a day, and then that achieves your 500 calorie deficit. But yeah, as far as dieting goes, don't overcomplicate it. I definitely think everyone has a pretty good idea of what foods are healthy and aren't. I definitely don't want to demonize any foods. No food is off the table. You don't want to restrict yourself too much. You definitely want to focus on foods that are going to help you fuel your body, what feels good. Obviously, you can have some staples, things like obviously eggs in the morning, chicken and beef for some protein sources later in the day. But definitely think at least 3 servings of protein a day is great. 2 to 3 servings of fruits and vegetables, 1 gallon of water, and you'll be on the right track. All right, guys, so we've gone over training, we've gone over supplements, we've gone over nutrition. If you have any questions about things, leave them down in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer those. Now we're hanging out with Maisie. The first thing we need to do is go over recovery, which is gonna be our sleep as well as our rest. So rest, I consider time outside the gym, making sure we have our rest days, making sure we do some mobility, some stretching, that kind of active rest, and then sleep, which specifically comes down to obviously the time we're in bed. And the time we're in bed doesn't always correlate directly with sleep. Sometimes we're in bed for 10 hours, but we only slept 6, and that's kind of a problem. So we definitely want to maximize our sleep. I recently read a study, if I find it, I'll throw it up on the screen. Something along the lines, they had subjects sleep for under 6 hours a night, and not a single person went without some sort of negative side effect. So basically, you need more than 6 hours of sleep per night. I personally recommend 7 to 8 for most people. I personally feel really good around 8, 8.5 myself. Obviously, it does fluctuate if you have a busy schedule, you have kids, I get it. But I definitely would prioritize sleep. If you're not getting 6 hours, that's the very first thing I would kind of correct in terms of my overall health and fitness, as it is kind of like the magic pill. If you were looking for a magic pill, there isn't one, but sleep is the closest thing to it. And as I mentioned, as far as like rest days, recovery, I definitely think that rest days are undervalued, but also recent studies have shown that rest days shouldn't be spent on the couch being a couch potato, but rather some sort of active rest is ideal because you get the blood flow, you get the recovery benefits of having additional blood flow. So I think going for walks is great, taking this one, said her favorite word, stuff like that. Just once again, getting the body moving, even if you're not in the gym lifting, I highly recommend on your rest days doing some ability work, getting general steps up, 8 to 10,000 steps a day, that kind of thing. And the last thing is gonna be overall best practices, managing expectations, and then balance. So as far as best practices, I would say make sure that you're doing something that's sustainable. If you can't sustain it for 3 or 4 months, what makes you think you're gonna sustain it for 3 to 4 years? So definitely find something that you enjoy. Obviously, will change. You might not always work out 4 days a week or 5 days a week, but find something you do enjoy, whether it's strength training, for a powerlifting meet, whether it's bodybuilding, whether it's general health and fitness, Orange Theory, whatever class, CrossFit, something is always better than nothing. Then you can kind of dig into the nitty gritty of what you enjoy and just make sure it's something sustainable for you. And as far as best practices, I was trying to come up with like an easy way to remember things, and I kind of ended up coming up with some numbers. So the big 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 I personally came up with was 1 gallon of water per day, 2 servings of fruits and vegetables, 3 meals with protein, 4 workouts per week, and then 5 minutes of mobility per day. So I think if you follow those guidelines, obviously you're not tracking anything, you're just going to the gym. That's kind of like the bare minimum or guideline I recommend you following. That'll definitely get you in the right direction if you aren't doing any of those things already. And if you are, great, then you can kind of enter the next level and really focus on honing your nutrition, your training, all that kind of stuff. And then lastly is managing expectations. So one of the biggest things I think a lot of people go into is I want to have my dream body in 3 to 4 months. I have clients that personally come to me with that same goal. Hey, in 3 months, I want to be shredded, I want to be beach lean. And they're at a point where we just need to rebuild their general health and fitness rather than try to achieve their dream body. So remember, this takes time. This is a long game. This isn't going to happen in 3 months, 4 months. This is going to take some time. And the biggest thing there is if you manage that expectation, you start to enjoy the process rather than just chasing that ever moving goal. Because trust me, my goal used to be bench 225, squat 315. I did that. and then I wanted to bench 315, and I wanted to squat 405, and then I did that. And the goals will always be moving once you hit that goal. But what I have found that leads to the best results is enjoying the process, because you don't even think about the goal at the end, but you break down that big goal of, let's see, getting beach lean or squatting 405 into small daily and weekly habits. And then when you knock out those daily and weekly habits, the goals just kind of fall down as you go. If you enjoy the process, if you're doing the little things on a daily and weekly basis, that's all you really need to do. So that's a big thing. Setting goals is great, obviously short-term and long-term, but break those into actionable items. Because if I said I want to squat 405, okay, that's a great goal, but how am I gonna get there? Okay, I'm gonna train squats twice per week. One day is gonna be high volume, one day is gonna be a high intensity. We're gonna continue that process. We're gonna do several mesocycles, work through it, and eventually squat 405. Same thing with trying to lose weight. I wanna lose 20 pounds. Okay, great. But what are we gonna do on a daily basis? Okay, we're gonna make sure we get our 8 to 10,000 steps a day. We're gonna get our fruits and vegetables. We're gonna drink water and make those actionable items that you can actually take action on, rather than just be like, oh, I wanna lose 20 pounds versus today, what am I gonna do that will get me to losing 20 pounds? That kind of thing. All right, see you, Maisie. But also, she never cuddles like that. I mean, wow, I feel loved today. That is awesome. Another thing about expectations today with social media and the digital world, you see these absolute roided up monsters on your Instagram page, your TikTok, your YouTube, and these guys are no help by managing your expectations. And sometimes those guys can be great sources of motivation. Like, I wanna go to the gym, I wanna look like Chris Bumstead. But also realize, if you're just being better than you were a month ago, a year ago, that's a huge win for you, and that should be motivation. If anybody you follow ever makes you feel discouraged, like, oh, I'll never get there, that guy's making so much progress, one, they're probably on steroids, even if they don't say they are. And two, don't follow someone who's not gonna give you motivation. Just unfollow them. And down the line, if you're in a better headspace mentally to follow someone like that and use them as motivation rather than comparison and then make yourself feel worse, go ahead and follow them back. But I recently did kind of a cleanse of like, hey, like, I'll be honest, some of these guys I follow, they just make me feel worse about myself, when that's not the case. That shouldn't be the case. So I unfollowed everyone that wasn't motivation, and now I don't regret going on Instagram and seeing someone who looks insane and being like, oh, why don't I look like that yet? Because I'm natural, I'm taking my time. My personal journey is different than everyone else's, so just remember that. And I'm gonna leave you with one last thing, don't overcomplicate it. The worst thing you can do is wait to start. The best time to start was yesterday, the next best time is today. So go ahead, get after it. Hopefully you guys got some great tips and tricks throughout the video. If you have any questions, definitely leave comments down below. I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. And if they're super complicated, longer-winded questions, I'll try my best to make a video on those during my prep series, where I'll cover all kinds of different topics. Without further ado, make sure to like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.